Welcome to a session leveraging water for security and resilience, tilting economies and shifting hydrologies. Good morning from Stockholm. If you're joining us remotely, very warm welcome to those of you that are here in person. I think we have a busy but very interesting, exciting session about things that are very much in the news, that are in motion and happening right now. My name is John Matthews. I'm the executive director for a group called AGWA, the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation. We're a global network that's been working on water and climate for about 15 years. The co-conveners, in addition and beyond AGWA, include GIZ, the Dutch Ministry for Infrastructure and Water Management, and the OECD. I'm very grateful for our partners. You'll be hearing from all of them today. And an early invitation to you, we really want to make this an audience-centric session. We want to hear your comments, your thoughts. We want to have you engaging in a conversation with us. I am going to begin with an opening framing talk. It's meant to be a little provocative. So, and to challenge, it doesn't necessarily fit with all of the talks that you'll hear. We're not a single a piece that we're presenting here, but again, trying to create a conversation in this space. So, my talk, water, climate, and economic resilience. A lot of how we have been thinking about resilience historically has been focused on the level of individual projects, maybe thinking about programs and other institutions, but thinking about economic resilience is still a relatively new idea. It's a change in the conversation, maybe one that is actually really necessary and important at a moment when we have an emerging set of global instabilities, insecurities, and uncertainties. I love this quote. It's from a report that Mark Smith at EME and I wrote with some other colleagues in 2019. If we can build resilience through water, we can move from a reactive and defensive approach to climate change to imagining how we can thrive. That's a different approach to how most of us think about climate change. Most of us think about adaptation resilience as how to reduce climate risks, how to make essentially the world a little less bad. But the idea of resilience to me is a larger, I think a warmer and potentially revolutionary word that says, actually, we need to think about moving, we need to keep doing risk reduction, but we also need to move beyond it. And the other word that resilience is in tension with, of course, is sustainability itself. I love to present really negative examples from the US. So that's where I'm from. The US regularly generates terrible examples of what not to do for the rest of the world. One of the things that the U.S. has consistently done, I think, in a time of rapid global change, is that we've tended to focus more on sustainability. I would say sustainability is how we think about continuity. It's how we keep doing something. And I want to challenge that. I want to say that resilience is actually how we thrive despite change. It means sometimes reducing risk, sometimes it means making adjustments, and sometimes it means getting ready for really radical, large changes that are starting to appear. This photo, for instance, is from the delightfully and badly named city in California called Paradise. So the city of Paradise experienced a horrific, super intense fire across this region. It wiped out whole towns. It killed hundreds of people. This metal that you see coming out of the car is literally a melted aluminum engine from the intensity of the fire. It transformed this landscape. It is a new landscape now. Yet the way that the resource managers, even the city managers in that area have responded is they've gone back and they've replanted the same kinds of trees and forests and systems that were there before this fire. The system, in the space of a matter of days, essentially renormalized into a new climate state. Yet what they've done is they've taken this assumption of sustainability, they've literally replanted the risk so that they will replicate in short order the same type of event again. This is not resilient, I would argue. And the idea of climate risk, it's a very hot topic. I just came from a session that was focused on particularly climate risk and the finance sector and how businesses are responding to kind of new and emerging conditions. And the term that I heard in that previous hour was climate proofing or de-risking. And that remains a really important part of our toolbox, and it's one that's evolving fairly rapidly. It typically focuses on just a handful of climate variables that we're experiencing. It tends to not say what might be occurring. It tends to also focus on individual climate projections, specific numbers about what we think is going to happen. We do have good tools that have been in place, often for quite a long time, about how to de-risk, but I would argue that it's a starting place, not an ending point. And the way it tends to frame issues is, here's a hazard, and there's our response, instead of saying, how is the system itself evolving and changing? And a great example, again, of like a lovely California example, they had a 1,200-year drought that ended in December, and in January, they had 25 million people under statewide flood watches. This is not just dealing with like a single issue in isolation. It's thinking about how the whole system is evolving. And if we just focus on one piece of it, we're missing that larger set of changes. And it makes it much more complex, but it's really the only way that we can be successful. So I'd also like to think of resilience as an addition on top of how we think about risk. And I'd like to use a metaphor here. I would argue that in a sense, resilience is about how we try to manage uncertain and potential risks, and it's really kind of embracing system-level change. And two examples. Imagine just from your own personal experience. If you're ill, you have a loved one who's ill, do you want the physician to focus on just one individual symptom at a time? Or do you want to think, maybe step back and say, this person has a variety of health issues. What does wellness look like for this person? And wellness over different parts of our life may look quite fundamentally different. We might have to actually adjust our definition, our potentiality for what wellness could look like. Same thing with how we might think about a child, how we raise a child. I have a son. And the way that I think and measure progress for my son over different points of his life, I have to adjust the standards. I have to think about how he is unfolding over time. And I can't judge him as a toddler the way that I would when he's 6, much less where he is right now at 15. He'd actually be pretty angry about it. So what kind of a doctor would you want? And what kind of a parent would you want to be, I would say, in that case? And what kind of a model of resilience do you want your institution, your country, your community to be operating in? So resilience, in my mind, ultimately, where de-risking is often an isolated kind of constrained phenomenon, resilience is an unfolding process that we need to engage in. So most, as I mentioned at the beginning, most adaptation resilience programs, they tend to focus at the project scale, like individual points of light, communities, ecosystems, infrastructure. I think that's natural because we often experience, especially climate impacts, on a very localized scale. But that may not be the right unit for how we evaluate, how we consider resilience. It may be at a larger scale, could also be potentially at a lower scale. For economies, and that's really the focus of this session. How do we evaluate and measure resilience? Right now, we evaluate their success at a macroeconomic level, at least, by thinking about growth, about productivity, efficiency, and optimization. And I would argue here that an optimized economy is not necessarily one that's resilient. It's really trying to think about a single future in a very optimized economy, not necessarily the multiplicity of futures that we could be facing. So 3 ideas that I'd like to propose about how we think about resilience in an economic context. This is a system level map from Amman. Jordan is a hyper-intensively managed water system. Like, they understand that there is no country without water. And so they place water at the highest level of government decision making. That is appropriate. Maybe it's one that many of the rest of our economy should also be thinking about. So resilient actions in the framework of a country like Jordan, ensuring redundancy of water is really embedded in a variety of sectors and systems, not just in the water sector itself, not just in the water that we can literally see. How do we move away from just maximizing, especially kind of pumping up our measurements about water use efficiency? I would argue from the climate community that they would say that's a very brittle system. It's one that is much more likely to be able to fail potentially suddenly and catastrophically. Whereas qualities like flexibility, redundancy, multiple sourcing, being able to renormalize regulatory and economic evaluation frameworks are actually all compatible with resilient systems, and ones that we're only just starting to think about from a macroeconomic level. So second level is look for water that may be hidden in our measures of growth in particular. Often water is dragged along in our approaches to thinking about growth, especially from a kind of political framework. So water, of course, I don't have to say this, reinforce it for a Stockholm audience, but water is deeply embedded within food, energy, and forestry systems. Increasingly, it's also embedded in our data and AI systems. And the resilient, the data processing centers themselves that are popping up like mushrooms in many of our countries. And so targets that focus on expanding energy or agriculture or data, and new types of investments often drag along water passively, invisibly, in ways that actually stress the rest of the system. And that, I would argue, is a dangerous thing to not be able to see. So even larger, in middle and lower income economies, we're seeing transitions that go from agriculture to manufacturing, or countries like Peru that are investing so heavily in areas like mining, or a country like Thailand or Vietnam wanting to move into service economies, or much of Europe and the US wanting to move into these new data economies. They are also passively bringing along new water assumptions, water commitments that may actually be creating new vulnerabilities in process. Even at the level of individual cities, how we think about their growth, tax revenue, they may be implicitly creating new water dependencies, new water commitments that actually make the city itself inviable or create the seeds of conflict for the future. The third point, the last one, is we need to assess water resilience as a prerequisite for financial feasibility. We need to think about the finance system itself and our economic evaluation systems and where we have missed the water that may be hidden inside of them. De-risking is good about exposing kind of coarse variability of vulnerabilities, and especially making comparisons across systems and places and institutions. But systems analyses are actually more useful, and there are not that many tools that have been prepared for them. The World Bank has a fantastic set of tools that have emerged called the Country Climate Development Reports. Our organization has one called the Water Resilience Tracker, working with many countries. You're going to hear some excellent examples from the OECD as well along these same lines. Adaptive and resilience components in a traditional economic analysis are heavily discounted. So that actually also is kind of hiding where water and resilience interventions themselves may be really useful. And we also need to look above these individual projects. I would argue we need to organize the isolated stars in the night sky into constellations. We need to think about how those projects are actually interacting with each other at larger scales. And that often is a gap that you see in terms of siloed institutions, ministries, public and private sector. And lastly, regulatory and disclosure frameworks can really incentivize water resilience. Groups like CDP have been working in this space for quite a while, but regulatory frameworks are also trying to move in that same direction. We have a publication. This one of the things that unites us as a group for this session is an initiative called Water Resilience for Economic Resilience, about how we translate resilience into a macroeconomic concept and also make it active, a real practice. So we have a publication that came out last year, and we have more that are en route. We have a webinar series and so on. We hope that you'll join us and continue the conversation after this session. Thank you very much. Hopefully I've framed the discussion, and I would like to do now is a handoff to the first of two additional speakers. Jana Leskinen is the International Relations Office with the European Union. He's in DG Environment, and he is going to be talking about the new EU water resilience strategy. Very hot topic, very timely, I think a model for where many governments and other institutions should be headed. So the floor is yours, Jana.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you for the invitation. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm privileged to come and present the European water resilience strategy to the Stockholm audience that John was already talking about. And I think the three ideas that you introduced in your presentation make a really good base for my presentation about the European strategies. I think we have a lot of similar ideas. This presentation is mostly focused on the big lines and the overall ideas of the strategy, and the international elements of the strategy will be more closely presented in Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. So European Water Resilience Strategy will be quite present in the Stockholm World Water Week this year. For Europe, the need for such a strategy was of course imminent. In February, the European Commission published three important reports assessing what member states are doing to protect freshwater and marine waters and to better prepare against floods. The overall findings are clear. Our waters are heavily polluted, our water supply is under pressure, and we are not reducing enough the risk of serious floods. This is why we needed a bold and comprehensive water resilience strategy to set a pathway towards more sustainable and resilient water management. Europe is the fastest warming continent, and since 2010, water abstractions have been increasing across all sectors except for electricity production. From 2010, the EU population affected by water stress almost doubled from 22 to 41% in 2022. Here is quite a clear bridge to John's presentation. We really need to stop this trend before it's too late. For these reasons, together with the strategy, we addressed a recommendation to member states on water efficiency first principle, setting an aspirational target to EU increase water efficiency by 10% by 2030. Water resilience is at the top of the political agenda in Europe, as conveyed by the European Council, European Parliament, and the European Economic and Social Committee. This is why, in her 2024 to 2029 political guidelines, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced the need for European water resilience strategy. This helps all parts of the EU to improve the management of its water bodies, tackle scarcity, enhance the competitive, innovative edge of water industry, whilst embracing a clean and circular approach. The strategy sets out a pathway to make Europe water resilient, firmly rooted in the 2050 vision put forward by the EU at the 2023 UN Water Conference. As you know, to develop the strategy, we consulted very widely and thoroughly including with major water users and other stakeholders from all member states. We received 570 contributions in response to our call for evidence in February. We organized 3 roundtables with farmers, industry, the financial sector. This allowed us and the water resilience strategy to consider all dimensions of water: environmental, economic, and social. The strategy has 3 goals, 3 objectives, and 5 priority areas. The objectives are to protect the water cycle, to build a water smart economy, and water and sanitation for all. Later on, next I will dive deeper into all of these objectives and priority areas. Our first objective is, of course, to protect and restore the water cycle. This is important because we must retain more water in our soils, forests, and wetlands, and ensure the quality of our water, that it's preserved and improved, including from emerging threats such as PFAS. We must be clear. Water quality and quantity go hand in hand. Second, we must build a water smart economy. This also has quite a good link to what John was earlier saying. An economy that can count on water to grow while using it more efficiently and reducing pollution. We must reduce demand, promote reuse, and enhance efficiency across all sectors, including industry, agriculture, energy, and data centers. And finally, clear water and sanitation for all. We must ensure clean, affordable water for all, recognizing that water is a human right. Increased consumer awareness, implementation of the Drinking Water Directive, better implementation of the Water Treatment Directive, way we do city planning and housing, and how do we exchange best practices on water pricing policies. These are good tools ahead, how to achieve water resilience in Europe. So, to reach these objectives, the water resilience strategy foresees a set of 30 concrete actions in 5 priority areas. First, to improve governance through cooperation and more effective enforcement. This is a priority and central pillar of the strategy. In this regard, we will start structured dialogues with each member state on better implementation of the water law, and we will hold, as of December 2025, every 2 years, a water resilience forum. The objective of improving coherence with EU legislation on freshwater, reducing reporting requirements, and improving data management and governance across the region will be important. Of course, we need financing for this. More funding for both green and grey infrastructure and better water management. Around 2/3 of the annual investments need for water are covered by public funding. But there is still an annual investment gap of around 23 billion euros. Our cooperation with European Investment Bank will mobilize 15 billion euros over the next 3 years, and it will be important to boost private investment. A new sustainable management water facility will help tackling some of the barriers for investments. This will also help making sure that member states take full advantage of the new opportunities offered by the midterm review of the cohesion policy to invest in water resilience. We are also proposing initiatives to mobilize much needed private investments, including Water Resilience Investment Accelerator to implement 20 innovative pilot cases for natural water retention and water efficiency, bringing together local water investors, solution providers, and problem holders to inspire similar actions across the European Union. Third, the better use of digital tools and artificial intelligence. There are inspiring examples piloted by Europe, by companies, municipalities, and regions, illustrating the huge potential to innovative solutions. To promote the deployment of such solutions, we'll develop a digitalization action plan for the water sector. The strategy also sets out actions to unlock the potential of Earth observation and digital twins and make it accessible to national and local administrations. Of course, research and innovation is part of the picture. For more research and innovation, more industry collaboration and training of skills. For instance, the Commission will develop a research and development strategy in support of water resilience, launch a dedicated knowledge and innovation community, and set up an EU Water Academy. We also propose setting up public-private initiatives for advancing solutions to clean up PFAS and dry cooling. John also talked a lot about security. And of course, we always, when we talk about security as an old humanitarian from the Red Cross movement, I know that security and resilience is also much else than not just promoting, preventing floods or responding to droughts. But of course, I'll talk about that first. Actions to resist floods and droughts will be crucial to ensure stronger climate adaptation. As I said in the very beginning of my presentation, Europe is the world's fastest warming continent. The need for these actions is really much something that European Commission can help the member states in better identifying flood and drought risks and better to protect water infrastructure. And we will also strengthen the Union Protection Mechanism, Union Civil Protection Mechanism, and the European Solidarity Fund to support member states in managing water-related disasters. I mean, I would maybe like to point out here that there is no more critical infrastructure than water infrastructure. This is something that is so cross-cutting, and it's so evident, and I think it's sometimes very much underappreciated in the security and resilience conversation that we have. And that has been very lively topic in Europe recently. So if you have time, I highly recommend you to read the Sauli Niinistö report, which was published last November. It goes through quite a lot of the actions that Europe needs to do in terms of resilience. Maybe, oh, that was the slide I missed. Maybe a few words about global action, since this is the Stockholm World Water Week. European Commission intends to promote the water resilience through the Global Gateway strategy. But one of the main goals that we have is, of course, to strengthen the global water governance. We are heading towards the 2026 UN Water Conference, and the water resilience strategy will be the flagship of the European Commission headed to the high-level meeting in Dakar and in towards the 2026 conference. I think it's very important that to mainstream water in international processes, including the Rio Conventions. The Triple COP is very important, and I'd like that this year's theme of the Stockholm World Water Week is Water for Climate. It's better and more timed than ever. Maybe just a couple more points on the next steps. We will organize this Water Resilience Forum regularly, and we will have the midterm review of the strategy in 2027, and we will do the evaluation of the progress in 2029. But releasing of the water resilience strategy was just the start of a very long way. Challenges I laid out there don't just involve Europe, these are global challenges. And this is something that we have to solve in great cooperation, in global cooperation, and we need whole of society approach to tackle the water-related challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Fantastic talk, Jana. Often people talk about journalism as the first draft of history. I would argue that maybe for all of us right now, the EU water resilience strategy is the first draft of prehistory. It's where we should be headed in many levels right now. Jana has said he's here all week. He knows that he's going to be in demand. He wants you to reach out and ask him questions, grab him in the hallway, tackle him if necessary. But you will no doubt be running across him over in other sessions as well. I'd like to now hand off to a longtime colleague, friend, and collaborator, Sophie Tremolay. She's the water team lead, the OECD Environment Directorate. Relatively new in that role, but we're so grateful that she's there. And she'll be talking about central banks and water as a systemic risk. The floor is yours, Sophie.
Thank you very much. And well, I'll wait to see my presentation. So I'd like to present to you some of the work that the OECD is carrying out on the financial risks associated with water and how we're working with central banks, building on the efforts that central banks have been undertaking for some time. And for me, in this new role, as John mentioned, this was one of a very interesting finding is that central banks are actually taking that matter very seriously and already started doing work. And that there is a collection of actors, including the OECD, including WWF, UNEP-FI, FCDO, etc., which are looking to support the central banks to do more in a more structured manner. So this presentation builds on great work carried out by my colleague Lila Davis, who's not with us today, but is there in spirit. And I would like to structure it in 3 points. So first of all, the fact, as I mentioned, that there is increasing evidence of water risks, which has come to the attention of central banks, policymakers. So we are in a different era, I think, from 15 years ago, where it was less prominent. Which means that we do need, as the water sector, to engage more with central banks and see them as a critical actor in order to drive policy changes, building on their existing efforts, but also bringing in our water sector specialism and points of view in order to enhance their activities. So I'll present what the OECD is doing in this area, but also what is needed going forward. So to set a little bit of context, we all know, and for example, the Global Commission for the Economics of Water report that came out last year demonstrated that the hydrological cycle has been tilted out of balance. And for a number of risk drivers which are affecting these changes, including climate change, of course, but also a lot of human activities related to land use change, overexploitation of water resources associated with population growth, pollution, invasive species, etc. And as a result, the degradation of freshwater ecosystems is also accelerating climate change because it's reducing the ability of natural systems to absorb carbon, for example. So all of these risks, which we typically classified as too much and too little water, polluted water, and disruption to freshwater ecosystems, have translate into physical risks for the economy, but also transition risks, which is when economic actors need to adapt to new legislation in order to adapt their business model or need to adapt to increasing awareness of these problems. They need to change their economic model. And that leads to economic risks with stranded asset, capital disruption, business interruption. We saw, for example, the massive impacts of the Valencia floods last year, which has, of course, come to the attention of the Central Bank of Spain. So we're now very actively engaging with them. I'll tell you a little bit more about this at the end of my speech. But there's also, impact on raw material price volatility and the need to adjust and relocate activities. All of this, in turn, is translated into financial risks. So the banks that are lending to businesses that are affected by those risks are themselves affected, which can cause liquidity risk and underwriting risks for insurance. So all of this is closely interconnected, which means that at scale, this can pose a problem for financial stability, and it's at the core of the remit of central banks, which is to maintain financial stability. So they can no longer ignore these risks, and they need to do so as they do with climate risk and nature risk. The work that we've been doing has been trying to highlight the specificity of water risks because up to this point they've been conflated with broader climate risks and not necessarily considered in their own right. So there has been more and more climate stress tests which have highlighted the importance of water. We have some examples here from Morocco where these tests found that over a third of bank portfolios could be exposed to drought risk linked to agricultural, food processing, tourism sector, and to the fact that households are in exposed areas. There were also a test carried out by the Dutch Central Bank looking at what would be the impact of extreme flood events in particular region of the Netherlands, in the densely populated western region, which would have an impact in real estate prices and therefore translates into an impact in financial stability. So we are seeing these studies. We're also seeing global studies that are demonstrating that water-related risk could have an impact of 7 to 9% of GDP, which is highest among other ecosystems. And this has been confirmed also by the estimates of the Global Commission for the Economics of Water, which found that developed economies could be hit in the region of 8% of their GDP by 2050, and that could be even higher for lower income economies, up to 15% of their GDP. And what we found in all the work that we've been carrying out is that these water risks at the moment are not fully captured by financial risk management practices. So we are seeing this interesting work that I referred to, but it's only in early stages and only partial. And there is no single approach that has been developing as we have seen more for climate, for example. It's also limited to a quite small number of central banks. Most of them are in Europe, so the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, the Banque de France, the Hungarian Central Bank has been doing work, but all other central banks are not necessarily in that space. So where we want to capitalize is, for example, on something like the Network for Greening the Financial System, which is a network initially set up by the Banque de France, which has been growing very rapidly and is now incorporating close to 150 central banks, which has been doing modeling of climate risks, for example, has then turned to nature. And now we really want to incentivize them to work more specifically on water. So how do we do that at the OECD? I've mentioned an earlier publication that came out in 2023, where we looked at what was going on, if you want, investigating the financial materiality of water-related risks. And we've been holding workshops with central banks. This is what you see here at the bottom of the slide, where we feel that there's really this group of front runners emerging. We've also been developing a supervisory framework for assessing nature-related financial risks and applied that with the Hungarian Central Bank, which I mentioned is very forward-looking on that, where most of the climate-related risks and nature-related risks, were related to floods and droughts. So it pointed to the very substantial materiality of water-related risks. So now we have an upcoming monograph that will be released in mid-October 2025. The OECD is an international organization with very lengthy sort of processes for publication. So we've been working on this for some time. And in that publication, we are exploring how they are currently integrating water-related financial risks into their core mandate. So a sort of state-of-the-art assessment, if you want. But then, and this state of the art is important for central banks, but I think it's very relevant for the water community as well, so that policymakers, practitioners in the water sector do understand what central banks do, what is their activities, not only for financial supervision of financial institutions, maintaining financial stability, but also they have a very substantial portfolio of investments. So how can central banks better invest their own portfolio? So I would encourage you when it comes out to look at it, and I'll give you a few highlights here, because it can enable you to engage with these new actors, if you want, that can support us. And it's therefore facilitating a dialogue between policymakers and financial supervisors. So some of the key takeaways is that freshwater degradation can impact a very large range of economic sectors, and we have examples in the report from agriculture, AI, housing, lots of different sectors that we look at. There's a broad consensus that central banks cannot ignore these risks, and some central banks have seen their mandate being changed to explicitly consider those risks. That's the case of the Bank of England, for example. There is increasing action on integrated climate risks into macroprudential measures, but also it's a realization that central banks work within a broader regulatory and policy ecosystem. So there's a whole range of regulations such as corporate disclosure requirements, sustainable finance taxonomies, due diligence, etc., which are all critical to trigger change for financial supervision. So we formulate a number of recommendations in this area, classified in short-term, long-term, medium-term and long-term, starting with elevating water-related risks in financial stability agendas. There's a very interesting initiative going on to put that topic on top of a G20 agenda sponsored by FCDO, and we are part of this central bank action group, if you want, to take this forward on the agenda of the Financial Stability Board, the Network for Greening the Financial System agenda. Then there are recommendations with respect to policy coordination, so see how we can foster greater integration of actions between central banks and policymakers. But also at the level of central banks, there's a keen appetite to learn from each other in terms of what scenario they can build, how to manage data, what level of granularity to go into, because of course, you know, water is very complex, so you can always get more data, but there's an insistence to, you know, try and make do with what we have. And then, of course, leading into changes in supervisory statements and guidance towards banks. I won't go into too much of a technical detail of that because it's very, you know, specific to central bank mandate, but the importance is that we, you know, all of these are well articulated in the report. And before I close, I'd like to sort of just highlight a couple of activities that we are sort of planning. So we're planning a roundtable on financing water. The OECD has been organizing these roundtables since 2017, where we've been really fostering dialogue between the financial community and the water community. So this one will take place in May 26 in Madrid. We're trying to sort of do it back to back with the Global Water Summit. So some of you might be planning to attend that. And we're doing it with the Bank of Spain, which is interested at the highest level. So, you know, governors of the Bank of Spain are really motivated with that. In which we will examine, you know, the role of financial supervisors, but also what are sector-specific impacts. Agriculture is top of mind, of course, in Spain, but also looking at, you know, financial market standards and regulations, the role of insurance, which has been very much discussed over the years, but, you know, we need to get to the bottom of really what can be done. So that will build on this paper. We invite all of you to, you know, who are interested to express interest, because we want to have, you know, participants from the central bank and financial supervisor sector through the NGFS, but also as many water people as possible. And then I've set out also some of the other analytical work that we're planning on the impact of water risks on sovereign debt, or also evaluating the economic and financial risks for specific sectors. So thank you very much, and happy to take a few questions if there are. If not, we can just continue with the panel. Thank you.
A warm hand for Sophie. Such a rich talk. It's fantastic. If we could take maybe one question. I think we have a couple of people with microphones. Do we have an... okay, right here, Patricia. Yeah. If you could also say your name and institution, please.
Hi, thank you. I'm Patricia Calder. I'm an independent water researcher and consultant. Fascinating talk, John and Jen and Sophie. My question is for Sophie in regards to central banks and what your thoughts are on the new European Central Bank. They announced that they are including a climate risk factor. And so my question is, how is that going to incentivize economies now that they are including that into their mandate, and how does, and I appreciate that is probably all quite new, and how will that incentivize the water sector? Because perhaps I imagine that they are incentivizing renewables, but perhaps Yeah, so your thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can answer in detail this question because it's very new, but I think the importance is that how this is reflected into mandates of central banks so that they can no longer ignore the climate, but then the nature, it's been sort of gradually increasing. And then what we're looking to do is really emphasize the specificity of water-related risks, because often there's been a focus on drought and floods, but making sure that also the impact of pollution, polluted water, in Spain, for example, there's very significant economic impacts of pollution, ongoing pollution from nutrients in Mar Menor, for example, in the south of Spain, and making sure that the degradation of freshwater ecosystems is also fully reflected in that. So I think the point is that the more it can be translated into explicit mandates for central bank, the more important it is. And then it can also lead to green financing requirements. So we have an interesting example cited in the report of the Hungarian central bank, in which they have changed the capital finance requirements for lending for green activities. So this type of lending criteria and capital requirements can be built into financial supervision. That's what we mean by. So there are activities that central banks can take themselves in order to facilitate investment in more water resilience. But there's a whole range of impact they can have, including what we see as very important is that of shifting political will. So by highlighting the macro criticality of water-related risk, they have the ear of the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economics, which is what we've been trying to do in the water sector for a long time with mixed results. So one of the theory of change by engaging with central banks is to say, let's go to the type of actors that can have an impact on shifting economic policies at the highest level. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We'll now turn to the panel. I'm going to have my colleague introduce the panelists, but I'd like to introduce her. Josefina Maistu will be moderating the session. She's a water economist. She's a personal mentor of mine. She's with the Spanish Ministry of Ecological Transition, and someone who I think really shows about how the field of economics itself is evolving and growing in new directions. So the floor is yours if you need to change. Yeah, good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. Now we are going to have a panel discussion, and the panel is going to be about what are the roles of the different stakeholders. So we have seen how resilience looks like. We have seen that also there is a lot to do with the central banks and economics, but now how is this done in practice? So I will ask my three panelists to come to the floor as well. So we are going to discuss what are the roles of the different stakeholders in this new landscape that we have. And in order to do that, we have first Miriam Seaman. Miriam has over 20 years of experience in integrated water resources management. She now works in GIZ. She has extensive experience in both the private sector and the German Development Cooperation, so thank you very much for being here with us. We have Harm Duell, who has been here for a long time. He's a strategic advisor on water and climate at Deltares. He has a background in wetlands ecology, so all these economics, is a little more far away for you. And he's developing international programs and collaborations on transboundary waters and the management and climate adaptation strategy. So you have quite a lot of practical experience, so thank you very much. I must say, Miriam also, no? You have been in Latin America for a long time, working also on the ground. Thank you very much. And then Dan Schuster-Beasley. Dan is a water security policy and strategic advisor at the UK's Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. He works focused on driving system transformation, so you have a difficult job there. For a more water secure world, engaging on policy, governance, and market. Okay, so we have a first set of questions which are a little more general to try to see how these three key experts understand this water resilience world. And then we're going to have a second part of questions on how this is affecting their practice. So Miriam, I'm going to start with you. What does water resilient mean for you? I mean, you've been working on this, so what does it do, for you in practice? Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. From my point of view, water resilience is the ability to cope with complex issues of climate change impacts on the water cycle while integrating climate adaptation, but also mitigation measures. And that means for our work that we need to have cross-sectoral but also integrated solutions, which requires the commitment and also the coordination with all stakeholders like governments, scientists, private sector engagement, but also across borders. But I think even more important, at least in the countries where we work, besides the fact how we define water resilience, is to really engage with the people, engage with our partners, be it on the national level or the regional level, in order to understand how they define water resilience and what their priorities are in order to find common solutions.
Thank you, Miriam. It sounds easy, no? All this coordination and cooperation, in practice is a little bit different. Okay, Harm, what is it for you?
Yeah, I think, from Deltares. Deltares is a research organization, so we do a lot of research on water. So that is our focus area. And of course also related to climate change. And I think what is mentioned many times, it's I think also important that when you talk about resilience, that is not about, let's say, what is also happening now, but also what is happening in the near future. And that also is addressing not only extreme events like floods and droughts, but also the whole hydrological cycle is changing. And I think that is also, you should take it into account, and you need also to prepare for that. And what is also mentioned already, I think it's also important that it's not only about water, it's about also related. Many sectors are depending on the water, and that you should take into account. So it's not only that the water community should talk to itself, but also with the other communities.
Yeah, okay. So because it affects the whole system, and all the interrelationships, so we need this coordination and cooperation. We also need to look at the future, not what is happening today. Because I feel sometimes, a lot of the times when we do planning and things like that, we are really thinking about today's problems. No, this idea of thinking beyond that and look at the future, very important.
Yeah. Well, I think what was also mentioned, so we had the presentation on the European Water Resilience Strategy, and currently also coordinating a program that is supporting also river basin organizations in preparing also for how to implement the Water Resilience Strategy, and also taking into account what is happening also in the near future. They know the current problems, but they don't know exactly what is happening in their basin, let's say, in the near future. And that's climate change, but there is also some economic development, so the demand on water is also changing. And I think that you have to find a kind of what we call then a safe operating space for the river basin managers, how to manage also their water systems.
Thank you, thank you. Dan, now George.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, going last is always hard on a question like this, but I think to go back to something that John said earlier, for us, when we look at this through the FCDO, resilience and water resilience, it's not about the ability to just cope with the challenges that we face as a result of climate and other stresses, but the ability to thrive. And I think that's really important, because if we just look at this on how we cope with some of the challenges we face today and in the future, we're actually failing in terms of the other, the human element and the ability for people and for planet to thrive together. Just very quickly, because I know we're short on time, but I do love this quote, which was, I was in Morocco a couple of months ago, and we were with some stakeholders, with some agricultural farmers actually, and we asked them, what does resilience look like to you? And their answer was, for us, it's the stability of the water table. It's the ability to access the quality in fresh water that we need when we need it, both for our agricultural productivity, but also for ourselves as people in our communities. And that's not talking about water resilience. That's their resilience. That's their resilience for their farms. That's their resilience for their communities. And to quote just again and coin a term from Agua, it's not just thinking about water resilience, which we've heard be defined today, but also water-centric resilience, which is looking at a much broader resilience, the resilience of systems, the resilience of economies, and how water is actually central to them. And it's not just about water systems and infrastructure in itself. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So we are in a disturbing environment, no? We have this climate change, we have political changes, we have economic issues here. So given today's shocks, you know, what is at stake if we don't mainstream water resilience? We're not talking about good water management, we are going a little bit beyond, no? What is at stake? What do you think, Miriam?
Well, we already heard a lot today in this interesting discussions before, but I think if we don't consider or take into consideration water resilience, this can have really serious impacts on essential services such as, you know, drinking water, sanitation, irrigation, all these services which are very important and in the heart of public health care, agriculture, but also industry. And this can even lead to, I don't know, food and nutrition scarcity, and especially in countries, in fragile countries, which are even more fragile to this. But I think we don't even need to travel far away to see these impacts. I mean, I remember in 20 and 22 in Germany were like experiencing severe revenue and crop losses because of droughts that we faced, and in particular. Agriculture products like potatoes and corn were impacted, but also even worse was that the low sea level in the rivers like the Rhine and the Elbe restricted shipping, and I mean complete supply chain were interrupted, which had amazing economic impact even in our country, you know.
Yeah. Very interesting, Miriam. Harm, what do you think?
Well, I think that is, I agree. So there is a lot of in stake in that sense, because what is also important to know is that I think there's also maybe some basic misunderstanding on what is resilience in terms that I'm an ecologist, and resilience is also used a concept also in ecology, that is that ecosystems can restore, let's say, that they have the capacity to restore back to the previous condition, right? And I think that is not the case when we talk about water resilience. We are not restoring back to the situation before the climate change. And I think that is something now also, we talked, you mentioned Miriam, also the Rhine and the Elbe, but I also have some discussions with the Danube Commission. They know that they have to prepare also for the future, because they know that it won't be the same hydrological conditions, because in the Alps the glaciers are melt, so there will be less water in the near future. And then how to deal then also with the water that you have in the near future, for shipping, for drinking water, for agriculture, for ecosystems as well. So I think it's a huge discussions we will have, let's say, in the near future, to find a good balance between all the demands that there will be.
So there is a lot of at stake. I thought you were an optimistic. I thought you were an
Everything
optimist.
is at stake, I would say.
Okay, so Dan.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think it was very interesting just building on Sophie's presentation. I mean, it's remarkable that the financial system hasn't yet taken on board just the scale of the risk, because it's not about just the future risks posed by water insecurity. one can already just look at the last 20 years, for example, with over $800 billion lost as a result of floods, and over 80% of that uninsured, so this is also an issue for insurance as well, and an additional $100 billion from the results of droughts. And as was mentioned from the work from OECD, but also the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, estimates of up to 15% of GDP loss in the upcoming years, up to 2050, for economies. This is huge. This is a significant part of financial resilience. And I think, I often hear far too much in World Water Week and in forums that talk about needing to get finance for water. And it's great. We all have water projects and we all want them to be funded, and that's needed. But it's actually a reverse that we need to be thinking about. How do we get water for finance? Because that is what's critically needed, building water into the financial systems.
Okay, fantastic, Dan. Okay, now we're going to go into the second part of questions, and I will start with you again, Miriam. So, how is water resilience embedded into GIZ programs? And maybe you can answer the two questions, on how GIZ can incentivize that this is taken on more.
Okay, thank you very much. How is it embedded? Well, first of all, I think it's important to mention that water resilient and the traditional development goals are quite aligned, and that the SDGs and also the UNFCCC convention is aligned and complementary, and that water resilience is very important to reach our SDGs, and that we, in order to do so, that we need integrated solutions, especially to, combine the three measures, and to work on the economic, on environmental issues, but also the social issues. And maybe just to share an example from Bolivia, where I worked before. There, I coordinated a project on climate change adaptation, where we supported the national and the regional policy and governments to develop a water strategy and also a climate change strategy. And at the same time, we worked at the local level with the communities, and we implemented ecosystem-based adaptation measures, like agroforestry systems, but also wetland conservation. And I think this green infrastructure is really important if we talk about water resilience, and also at the same time talk about how to meet the traditional development goals.
Yeah, and how can GIZ incentivize this to be incorporated into practices?
I think that incentivizes it at three levels. At the first one, we are supporting the development and also the mainstreaming of the concept itself of water resilience, by also flagging it at international conferences, but also we are supporting the Water Resilience for Economic Resilience initiative from AGWA. And secondly, we work on the ground, where together with partners, where we create success stories, hopefully success stories, in the majority of the countries, and where we also support capacity building to understand what we define and how we understand water resilience. And not only working with traditional partners from the water sector, but also from stakeholders from the bank sector or the private sector. And I think it's really important to engage more with the other sectors also in our work, and not to convince ourselves in the water community about the importance of the concept.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a little surprising to me that conventional, traditional development projects can incorporate resilience, normally. So I think that's a very interesting insight there, because I thought it would be, it would change a little bit the ways, the ground, and the ways people do things. But it's good to know that is possible. Dan, so how does the FCDO mainstream water resilience, and what do you do to incentivize it?
Yeah, thanks, Josefina. I mean, I think you were just talking there about the traditional development architecture, and I think first of all, just say that is changing at the moment, right? And that's changing globally, but it's changing very much in the UK as well. So I'm part of the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, and we have seen, as a result of shifts in geopolitics, that there is a shift in the need for where the UK prioritises its funding at the moment, and part of that is, unfortunately, cuts that we will see to the traditional aid budget. So we need to be thinking about how we do things differently, not just what we're doing and where we're doing it. And as part of that, I think we're trying to really shift to move from that old sort of traditional paternalistic donor model to something about modern partnerships with countries which are more partnership-led and trying to understand and listen to the communities who are facing water scarcity or facing the challenges of water insecurity first and foremost, and work with those governments more in partnership. And I think that's very much something that we're trying to do at FCDO through our Just Transitions for Water Security partnership, which I'll come on to in just a minute. But in terms of how we actually embed water resilience into this, so we're at the moment going through creating our own strategy, the 2035 strategy, so for the next 10 years on climate, nature, and energy. And what we're trying to do throughout this, and sort of part of my work and the work of my team, is to embed water resilience at a systems level into that. So again, we're not going to have a few projects or programs working on water. I don't think we'd ever make the transformational difference we want to. It's about working with our colleagues, our diplomats across the globe who are working on energy systems, who are working on agriculture, 70% of water users from the agricultural sector, who are working on tourism and looking at trade, and trying to use all of our diplomatic levers. And again, back to that water-centric resilience, make sure that water is understood as to how it impacts on all those different sectors and how they can integrate water into the work that they're doing. So taking a holistic and systems approach to water resilience in our strategies is what we're trying to deliver. One of the ways we're doing that is through this Just Transitions for Water Security partnership that is similar to GIZ and what Miriam was just saying. It's working at multiple levels. So it's working on the ground, in specific countries where we think we can have impactful and meaningful work. And again, that's done by the demand led from the country. So it has to be with their partnership and with their ideas forming actually the areas of work which we prioritize there around water. And then also at the global level, and using both our global influence but also our partners to strategically shape the dialogue on water security and the governance. So we do this through three areas. We look at the policy reform. That's at national level, also at subnational level, working with governments and their NDCs, their NAPs, making sure that they have water resilience built into them. We look at the governance at these systems, and particularly for the UK, we're prioritising looking at supply chains and private sector role in this, and the need for private sector not just to look at site-specific areas, but across their supply chains as to where there's weakness as a result of water insecurity, and how to be better water stewards. And in order to do that effectively, you've got government, you've got private sector. Of course, you also need civil society and to strengthen accountability for the measures that we put in place. And then once we have the policy and we have the governance work, of course, it comes back to finance. And so part of the work that we're doing through the Resilient Water Accelerator is trying to mobilise finance through unlocking the barriers to investment at scale, whether that's engaging with the central banks, as Sophie was talking about earlier, around the regulatory markets, but also bringing in governments and private sectors to look at innovative blended finance and things like that. And yeah, we're very lucky to work with organisations like the Water Resilience Tracker, with AGWA and IMI, the Fair Water Footprints work, or indeed the Resilient Water Accelerator. And I'm happy to talk about more of those in questions or after the session too.
Yeah, so there are good news, no? Because we can see how this water resilience concept that seems to be very new, no, is now part of the practice. You know, now we are talking about central banks incorporating it. We are talking about the European Union, you know, doing this breaking document on water resilience. We have the development agencies mainstreaming water resilience, so very impressive. So it's something that I was going to think that that's something, you know, that is more difficult, but it's actually part of practice. So this is very good news. So I'm going to finish with Harm, and this is on purpose because I know he's always saying things which are a little bit disruptive. And Harm, you have been in this business for a long time, no? With the need for greater resilience, what do you think are the long-standing assumptions that we have in the water sector, or the water assumptions, I would say, that somehow, somewhere, we need to deal with?
Yeah, I think what the biggest challenge is also where you talk also with the river basin commissions, with the river basin managers, whether it's in Europe or outside Europe. I think it's they face some problems that are, let's say, today problems. They face floods, they face droughts and other challenges. So I think that they are aware that the system is changing, but they don't know exactly what it will be right, in the near future. So I think that is, you also see there is a kind of, maybe also a kind of disconnection between what is happening also with the climate research. So there is a lot of climate modeling, and then also there are global models, and then also the impact on the hydrology is also used then in that sense on the global space. That information is not coming to the river basin level. That stays in the science community. And I think that, the science community and then also the river basin managers should work more closely together in that sense, right? In a more collaborative way. I think that is what is also needed in this sense. I think it's too far away from each other. So, and based also in the discussions we had also with the river basin commissions, they see that there's a clear need. They need some help also to make some projections for them also for what is happening then also in the near future. To develop some scenarios on a river basin level. And then they can also act. They have the tools, they have also some data that they can also use in that sense. So that is not the problem. But helping them also with the process, I think that is more important.
Okay. Harm, and in relation to how can you translate water resilience into action, no? You've been working in many projects. We've seen some good ideas, no, from the European Commission on how you can translate this into action. No? We heard about more investment, yes. We heard about digitalization. We heard about this resilience accelerator. We heard about an academy. So there is a number of proposals there. So they have not only preached of what we need to do differently, but also they have created some tools and instruments. So what do you think, in your experience, what is the key? What is the key to making water resilience something of normal practice in projects?
I think what is needed is you need, let's say, cooperation at different type of levels. Let's say from government to local, in that sense, and maybe then also in when you talk also about transboundary systems, also we have a transboundary context. I think that is key, and having a very strong engagement. Not informing them, but also from the start, let's say, in this whole process. That also needs some time. We mentioned also the Just Transition for Water Security program. I think that is also a good example where you have 3 different work streams from policy level to local level, working in the same countries to see how we can also boost, let's say, actions also for water resilience. I think that is a good initiative. And that is also needed also in other countries, that you have to work together on the different levels. And I think with a strong engagement, I would also say you have to make your stakeholders also shareholders.
Shareholders,
yeah. I think that is maybe the key.
So not just part of the issue, but owners of the issue, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you have an example? You have an example somewhere where you have worked?
Yeah, I think Deltares do a lot of international projects and supporting countries, and I think what also through the Dutch funding, we also supported Bangladesh in that sense, also developing the Bangladesh Delta Plan, and that is also adopted also by the government, by the parliament actually. I think it's not only that they want to make a plan also for adapting to climate change and deal with all the extremes that they have, but also to look for opportunities also for economic development. And I think that was also the reason why it's also part of the economic planning in that process. And I think that is really a perfect example how it should work in that sense, right?
Very good. Okay, well.
They still lack the funding, but the plan is there. Right?
Okay, well, thank you very much to the three of you. Yes, Miriam.
Yeah, maybe to add, I think beside focusing on implementation, it's also very important for all of us who are working at implementing agencies to also focus on measuring and communicating the impacts of water resilience actions that we do in the different countries.
Okay.
I mean, this is a challenge because usually, especially if you work on green infrastructure or water or nature-based solution, etc., you can usually start measuring the impacts after 5 to 7 years. This is usually after the project, since the project usually runs 3 or 4 years only. But nevertheless, I think it's very important, also not only for us, but also for the others, to communicate our impact and to start from the beginning on to think how we can measure and communicate it.
Yeah, very important. Communication, embedding water resilience in economic planning. So there's a number of recommendations here. So what do you think about, you have any questions about what is being said here? 1, 2, okay. I'll take this one first and then you, okay? Thank you. Can you say who you are or where you come from? Yeah.
Thank you, colleagues. My name is Nick Tandy. I'm with SNV. Really great discussion. So typically we hear from you and we know that the decisions in the budget to make a system resilient lie across disparate institutions, right? There's so much a city can do with reducing non-revenue water, reuse, nature-based solutions. They can't invest typically outside of administrative limits. But the risk, for example, that is flood risk, is generated in a basin that's upstream of the city. So now you need to work with farmers, the agricultural sector. The budget and decisions for efficiency of agriculture are held elsewhere. And so too are the budget and decisions for bulk infrastructure and allocation, say in a water agency. So how to invent this quality cooperation? It can't be done we know it can't be done in a crisis, right? Can economic policy incentivize high quality cooperation during the good times? Thanks.
Okay, I think we have another question here. Who wants to take that?
Yes, thanks a lot. Jean Lapec from Action Against Hunger. My question is, well, I really like the session and I appreciate the fact that we know how to deal with water resilience. I think we've got strategies, we've got good ideas, we've got plans, etc. But the reality is that we don't have money. And we have even less money in 2025, as you know, including for Germany and for England and for France also. When you were saying at the beginning economic efficiency is in tension with resilience, this is even more true for the Global South. The Global South country cannot invest in water resilience. They will need money for that. And us, who are supposed to fund the NAPs, we cannot even fund the NAPs. So the adaptation plans are not funded. So basically we are speaking out of the blue, proposing a model that we cannot support. So my question was, how are we going? So I understand that it's not only about ODA, that there are other models to promote. But my question is how Europe, for example, and US plan to cope with that financially and politically. Because technically we all know how to do, and I think it's great that we reaffirm that, but it's not enough. You know, we are going to have the COP. On the last COP, well, the NAPs were not funded. So what do we do? Thank you.
Okay. You know, for your second question, I mean, I don't know whether the panelists will want to say something, but I think it's a very good open question for Sophie, and the roundtable on financing. And, what are we going to do? How are we going to deal with this? So I think maybe I always feel that there is no real home, there's not a real institutional home for finance in the water community. And we have the OECD who's been working on that, and they have the contacts with, so we need maybe to make sure that there all these conversations are there. But I will let so the first question was about, whether we can use the economic institutions to produce that level of coordination that doesn't happen otherwise. So, Miriam, you want to say something? I'll ask you to, yeah.
Well, I think this is one way, but I think it's important to look for sustainable measures, and usually they are not that sustainable. I think it's important to work on the ground with the people to make it sustainable, and there are different mechanisms like the river basin commissions or other platforms, because if you don't have it on the ground with the people, usually it works while projects are on the place, but then after the project ends, the sustainability is not assured. So I think, we need to work it from the bottom up. This would be my
Then you
answer.
have an opinion on both, I think.
I do have an opinion on both. Thanks, Josefina. First, I'd love to know about what these good times are that you referred to. It feels like we're in back-to-back crisis, really. But no, the point's valid. We need to be thinking about this with foresight. We need to be doing that strategic planning. Building on what Miriam was just saying about this, multi-stakeholder engagements, and particularly doing that at catchment or basin level. Right, because you can't be doing this at site-specific level. You need to be thinking broader. You need to be thinking bigger. Just to go into a little bit, not too much, but a little bit of detail of what we're doing with the water resilience tracker is precisely some of this work of bringing together at the government level, at the national level, but also at subnational. But I'll talk about the national level. Those multi-stakeholders together. So bringing together the Ministry of Agriculture, bringing together the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Tourism, those different areas, looking at how they have their own water, whether they do or don't have water integrated into their plans, but then looking at that across the board. So seeing how do you have a holistic piece of water management and integrated water resource management at national level, seeing where those trade-offs are going to be. And I think that's something we don't talk enough about as policymakers. This is a limited finite resource, particularly in some of the water-stressed and water-scarce areas. How do we manage those trade-offs? You can't have the energy transition you want with the agricultural productivity growth that you're planning for in your current plans without also managing water. So by having those conversations and bringing that up to the top political level is key. And I think the second piece is that when you get to these discussions, who actually holds those decision-making strings? It varies from country to country, but in the most part, it's, if not head of state level, it's the Ministry of Finance. And that's where you need to really kind of be targeting that. I'm being asked to finish up. I'm just going to very quickly respond to one question. I think it's really important we don't talk about less money, right? The money is still there. It's just being spent in different ways. So there is going to be less ODA and grant financing. A lot of that money at the moment globally is moving towards security. Water intersects fundamentally with the security agenda too. And so there are different ways of starting to see this kind of agenda and the way that financial flows run. I think when we talk about financing, the other key part is not just new money, but old money. In the session I was just in with Sophie on nature-based solutions, we were talking about this. Over $600 billion dollars annually in agricultural subsidies. Most of those, or many of those, are harmful subsidies that can be repurposed towards nature-based solutions, repurposed towards water. And I also think, to the financing of these national adaptation plans and NDCs, because they're meaningless if they're just paper. They need to be financed. But we need to move away from a conversation of less money. The money's there. It's just how do we tap into it? How do we tap into the central banks? How do we tap into private sector? How do we de-risk for private sector investment to have long-term sustainable flows? But the point's very valid and well heard, yeah.
Okay. Harm, I think we're out of time. Is that okay? If we leave it there?
Okay.
Okay. Round of applause for our excellent panelists. Thank you very much. And I'd like to invite Niels Landerberend from the Netherlands Ministry from Infrastructure and Water Management. I always forget the name of the ministry. So thank you very much. He's going to do some concluding remarks. Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you, Josefina.
Don't worry.
And thank you all for this rich discussion and introductions. Let me tell you, I will not summarize this session. I will tell you some of my takeaways from this session. I'd like to start with one, and that's the message which is mentioned in different interventions. I think we should more think on a system level scale. Take the complete hydrological cycle into account. We as a water community focused on a partial analysis for a long time. Both blue and green water connect to landscapes and ecosystems. I think it's important. Our solution space was for a while limited to the water space, to the blue water system. So I think we should really make serious effort of bringing in the green water as well. And to improve resilience, we need a physical system lens at the different levels we work in, where we include water related to soil, vegetation, oceans, and climate, air, because of these interdependencies. And then we should better understand how these physical systems work for water in interaction with the other parts of the physical system, and how these systems are influenced and changed because of our human behavior and political or policy decisions, and also the effects of urbanization and land use changes in that respect. Second, we like to be here in Stockholm with all our water friends. I think it's often said, and I think we heard some attempts, but I think it's very important that we make an effort of make the connection with other parts of the world, especially bring our messages to the political discussions. And I think I heard already some hopeful signs, the G20, but also the conversation with central banks. But also there, I think it's always important that we have develop a good narrative which speaks to this political level and should not be too technical, because we as water people we have the tendency to really make things complex. And I think it's the trick to make it simple enough, and also the way that it can easily be taken on board. So, and I think in this way we hope that it becomes a domestic as well as an international priority. Third, I think the urgency. We heard some examples that the effects of not delivering on water resilience has a major economic and financial consequence. And also the water resilience strategy of the Commission makes clear it also involves even the competitive, this is a difficult word in English, please help me in this. To become competitive, and I think it's important and urgent. Then we'd like to look into the financial risks. One of the levers to create awareness action is looking through the lens of financial risk and stability. Well, the work of the OECD, presented by Sophie, presented a valuable overview of short, medium, and long-term recommendation, action, and key actors. But one influential lever stands out, and that are the guardians of the stability of our financial system, and that are the central banks. Building in financial risk in financial stability frameworks is not the same as building resilience. So I think it's the case that it should be our aim to build in water resilience into water resilience into our financial stability risks frameworks. Sorry. And I will close looking forward. I said this before, I think a lot has to do also with communication. We have to really improve our narrative. And we have to break out of our water bubble and bring our message to the financial and economic meetings. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this session. I hope that you'll come down and engage us as individuals and that you'll see us over the course of the week. You're a wonderful audience. And to those online, also very grateful for your attendance. Thank you.